Hey folks, how you doing? It's been a long time. Let's get to it. I am making this video so that you folks could get your hands on this if you can. This is a San Martin. Model number is SN006-G2. I'll write it somewhere around here, I would think, along with the specifications. Let me kind of quickly go over the reason as to how I got this watch. So I had a Tudor Black Bay 58. Didn't really like it all that much, not for the price point anyway. So I know that it's kind of sacrilegious to say something like that, but it just was just what I felt. So I flipped it. Then Tudor came out with a Pelagos 39. I really liked the look of that watch at least at that point. But I didn't want to go for Tudor again, so I was looking for some homage watches. There weren't any available. This is almost 2.5 years ago. So I didn't, there was no Tudor Pelagos that was available at that time. So, but they had this one. This is a San Martin version or homage of Tudor Submariner 94110, the Snowflake. So more of a retro version. So they had this version available. It was around like $350 for this, which is pretty crazy. But I mean, this was the closest thing that I have, and I didn't want to spend another $4 to $5 grand for Pelagos, which was what it was going for at that time because it was a hot commodity. So I got this one, and I liked this watch so much that I got 2 additional San Martins afterwards. I thought it would be a similar quantity, but it was not. So the 2 additional San Martins that I got was the Black Bay 58 homage, along with the Pelagos homage that came out, I don't know, about a year ago or something like that. So let me kind of go over the quality difference that I was seeing versus this version versus the other. The other 2, I didn't like it all that much, so I actually flipped it. Sorry about that. My heater came on, so I had to turn it off. But here we go. From a quality perspective, the difference between this watch and the 2 other San Martins that I got along the bracelet, I would think that the bracelet was made from the same factory, but there is a drastic difference between the polishing and the smoothness of this bracelet versus the other 2 San Martin homages that I got, especially along the clasp. The clasp on this particular model is smooth. It's smooth as butter, man. The other 2, especially the Black Bay 58 homage, on the clasp, it felt like I was emo, listening to My Chemical Romance or something because it was cutting up my wrist. I did not like that, so I flipped it fairly quickly. This one, there is a drastic difference, I'm telling you, between this particular model, which I can't seem to find it available online anymore, versus the other 2 models that I got for the Tudor homages from San Martin. The other quality difference that I was seeing was, maybe the camera could pick it up. I don't know if you hear the rotating bezels of this particular model. The other 2 that I got, when I was rotating the bezel, it sounded almost like pinging, like a aluminum, almost like it was gonna fly off. Versus this one is very, very solid, which I really, really like. I'm not a big bezel guy, but I just remember when I picked up the other 2 and I started kind of rotating the bezel so that it could be aligned, there was a drastic difference that I noticed right away. So speaking of the bezel, when I got this model, I really didn't like the look of the bezel all that much because it's a Tudor Submariner, a vintage watch homage. The bezel itself is, even though it's ceramic, it's kind of faded it out. So kind of ghosted out a little bit. Initially, I really wasn't all that into that particular look. But more I spend time with this watch, I really, really, really love that particular faded out look. It's not done too much, but it's done just enough to be subtle enough to be not totally in your face. So the Pelagos model that I got, the homage, I just remember the bezel, the numbers just stuck out like a sore thumb. I just don't like that anymore. I like the more subtle look of this particular partially faded out or ghosted bezel look. On top of that, the hour markers, so I was looking for square hour markers, and this one has square hour markers, but it's not really prominent. So it almost looks like it's printed, but it's not really printed. It's applied, but there's a slight texture on it, but from afar away, it's gonna look like it's printed. But if you look at it really close, then it's gonna appear as though you're gonna see a slight amount of texture on it, which is what I really, really like. So instead of just being so prominent like the Pelagos model, the hour markers here, the square hour markers that you see, more like the vintage look. It's not totally vintage where it's printed, but it has a little bit of a texture, which what I really enjoy at this moment. Along with that, I would say the dimensions of this watch is listed as 13.5 inches thick, but a lot of that is that box crystals. I would say about 1.5 of that is the box crystals. So the total dimensions or the thickness of this watch is probably around 12. It feels like a 12 millimeter watch from a thickness standpoint. So I like the fact that from a diver perspective, that is a pretty thin watch, and it fits like a thin watch on your wrist. So even though it's listed as 13.5, which is pretty, I guess average size for a diver, it doesn't feel like that or even look like that when you actually get it and look at it in close. What do I actually have any cons about this watch? Definitely. One of the cons that I have is around the lugs. The lugs is not lined up. Well, in camera it looks like it's lined up okay, but in person it's not really lined up all that correctly. The lugs protrude out a little bit more than the actual end links, and this is a female end link, which is good. But there is a little bit of a difference between the lugs where it's a little bit longer than the actual end links, which kind of bothers me in a way. And on top of that, the watch itself is, the lugs are kind of flat. There tends to be a gap between the wrist and then the lugs, and that little triangle that forms, and it kind of floats on your wrist a little bit. I sense that with this watch, which I'm not a big fan of. A good example where I see really good curvature on the lugs is this is my Grand Seiko. This is obviously a different price point, but if you look at the actual curvature of the lugs right here, man, when this thing sits, it feels like I'm a soldier who just came back from a war and somebody just came, like a girl's running up to me and giving me a big old hug. Like, it just wraps around your wrist like nobody's business, this particular watch. But versus something like this, yeah, I mean, it's kind of flat, so it creates a gap between your wrist and the watch itself. This logo right here, it's applied, and if you get it close enough, then you see that little San Martin logo there. You see the details, but majority of the times you're looking at it like this, and then when you look at it like that, it's just a mess. It's just a big old blob that you see underneath the triangle hour markers, and it looks like like little Uzi Vert's forehead or something. Like, it doesn't do anything. It has no character, no details. I wish, because this is a throwback to the vintage watch, the Tudor Submariner, they should have went printed logo on this instead of apply, because now it just throws everything off, in my personal opinion. So I'm not a big fan of that. But otherwise, overall, I cannot recommend this watch high enough. It's really difficult for me to just talk about it, but once you feel the texture of the bracelet, along with the clasp, along with the build quality, and I compared it with the Black Bay 58 homage along with the Pelagos homage, there's a dramatic amount of difference in the build quality. I will put a link to the actual product page in San Martin for this particular watch. It doesn't seem to be available there or anywhere else, but if you could find it, get it. You won't regret it.